Welcome to the Strong for Life podcast. I'm your host, Conor O'Shea, and I really appreciate you tuning in. If you are enjoying these episodes, I'd really appreciate you taking a moment and rating it 5 stars on Spotify or on Apple or whatever podcast platform you use. This is going to allow more people to find this information. Without further ado, let's jump into today's show. Okay, guys, so me and Brad are back this week. We're going to talk about how to get absolutely jacked out of your mind with our new program. So, but all jokes aside, we're going to talk about fasting and building muscle, also things to be aware of, and also protein, which is just, these are common things that are coming up. Like we're talking about this in particular. A lot of these conversations me and Brad are having every 2 weeks is around questions that are coming up repeatedly with the clients in the program. And a pattern that I've really seen over the last year is that a lot of the guys will come into the program who they come in because they have an injury and they end up rehabbing their injury, shoulders, hips, knees, lower back. And then they also they end up dropping quite a lot of body fat, even though we're not really focusing on it. But like a lot of guys have dropped 5 to 15 kilos in like a 6-month period without even really realizing it, just from the habit changes that we focused on. Like sleep is like the massive one, but then also just planning food, slowing down their eating, and just focusing on food quality, cooking meals, like really, really fundamental basic stuff. So they basically get that foundation in place, and then they're like, now I've rehabbed my injury. I'm actually pretty lean in comparison to where I was. So now I'd actually like to build some muscle mass and probably work on skills like stuff on the rings, like a muscle up or a handstand, or get stronger with squats and deadlifts, or all of them. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about today, is the kind of steps that we take with it. And we're going to just talk about fasting first of all. So I think I'll get Brad to just jump in and just explain the different maybe types of fast that we recommend for someone who's never done fasting before. Like where's a good place to start? So Brad, I'll let you take it away from here.
Sure. I would say probably I wouldn't say the easiest, but maybe the most simple way to start is with an intermittent fasting of a 16-hour fast, 8-hour window of eating. So depending on your preferences of when you like to eat and whether you like to go to bed with a relatively full stomach or not, that'll determine when you choose to begin your fast. When I've done it, I've always found it best to eat my last meal for dinner and then skip breakfast, or even if I didn't skip the meal, just have my breakfast much later. So say I finish eating at 8 p.m., then I can eat my next meal again at 12 p.m. the next day. So might then have something light, like a little smoothie or something like that, and then a lunch later on or something like that. So 16-8 is a pretty common window. You can also explore with 18-6, 20 and 4. Obviously it becomes more difficult the longer you're fasting. Another approach, which I think is, if you can get through a sizable fast, like a 24-hour fast, it's quite nice to just do the 5-2 split, which you eat 5 days of the week as normal, and 2 days of the week you would fast, not actually in a row. So you might fast on a Tuesday and again on a Saturday or something like that. And that's quite nice, I think, in a way of really removing a lot of the thinking involved. You just kind of, okay, well, the Tuesdays and Saturdays I don't eat. It's quite an easy way around it. But likewise with the intermittent fasting, I think, well, if you don't eat breakfast, you just don't eat breakfast, and that's it. You don't have to think about it anymore. Just some more examples, or want to chat through those?
Yeah, I think that's good, mate. And like, just to be really clear for people, like fasting, there's nothing special about it. You can get changes with your body composition. We always talk about like the 3 levers from Peter Attia. So it's the time restriction lever you can pull. the calorie counting or calorie restriction lever or the dietary restriction lever. So for some people, fasting just works really well. It's easy. Like Brad was saying, you don't really have to think. You just skip your breakfast as an example. And all of a sudden, skipping your breakfast, you've pulled out probably 600 to 800 calories out of your day right away doing it that way. We are going to talk about kind of potential downsides of fasting as well. Like it's not for everyone. A lot of people that we coach don't do it. I've gone through phases of doing it a lot. I'm actually not really doing it a lot at the moment, I'll kind of get into that a bit later. And yeah, there's nothing magical about it. Really, it's just helping you create a calorie deficit, which is going to help you get those body composition changes. The one thing that I will say that has come up a lot with clients is a sense of freedom. So this is like an important thing to think about as well. A few of the guys in the program have said to me that before the thought of doing exercise in the morning or going for a walk or doing anything basically in the morning until they've eaten was out of the question. Like they couldn't do it. One of the guys in particular was saying his wife would go walking or she'd go off and do exercise, and he was just like he would never do it. And then we introduced him to the fasting, and he found it actually very liberating because he then would just skip his breakfast. He'd have more time to do stuff, spend time with his wife. But then if he was working, if he had something come up at the last minute and he had to skip a meal or miss a meal, it just wasn't a big deal anymore. And it wasn't affecting his energy levels or his mood. So this is just a way of building that kind of flexibility and giving you more freedom around your emotional attachments to food, which I think can be very, very helpful with fasting. It's kind of the same thing with like training. You train because it makes you more resilient. It makes you more lower injury risk. You can be more available to do anything you want from a physical capacity. You can travel. You don't worry about getting hurt if you're playing with your kids, playing with your dog or whatever. So it's the same kind of thing. This is just something to make you more resilient overall.
Yeah, I just like to reiterate that about the feeling you need to be training on having eaten something. Just something I always thought as well I needed to do. And I guess part of it's that, the protein window and all these things that have kind of been debunked. Well, the importance has been sort of nullified somewhat. You still have a window, but it's not an hour after training, for instance. And if you train on an empty stomach, it's not like suddenly your muscles are going to atrophy, which people sometimes like make the suggestion, you've got to come in the pre-workout meal and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I found it to be actually preferable for me. And often if I have to train later in the day for whatever reason, it's actually quite unpleasant. You find yourself, feeling a little bit weighed down. At least I do when I train on a fullish stomach.
Yeah, I definitely prefer training like on a empty stomach as well, or not having a lot of food in my system. Okay, cool, mate. So let's maybe talk about any downsides you see from fasting, or what sort of areas do people need to be aware of if they are fasting, or maybe they're not feeling like it's something for them. Basically the negative sides of fasting.
Yeah, I mean, definitely at the beginning, which I don't think is necessarily a deterrent, but it can be a challenge initially, is, when you get to that hungry phase, or what you perceive as hunger initially, and then all you can think about is food. And if you sort of like in your fast, I know when I've done 24-hour fast, it can sometimes feel like that, you think at about hour 20, just like imagining all the things you're going to eat when it finally finishes. So I think that's, kind of if you think too much about food, it's maybe not, it can be counterproductive for you. So that's a potential downside. Also for some people it just doesn't fit their lives. It's like maybe, I know we've got a client who feels they just lack energy if they don't have something for breakfast, for instance. So then, and the results that client is achieving is fantastic without fasting. So it's not, as you say, it's not an important, it's merely a tool. It's not a necessity. So yeah, I think I know you and I have spoken about this, which I'm sure you're going to get into, but if we're always thinking about food and we're kind of feeling overly restricted when the opportunity to eat comes, we might think, oh, now we can feast and go a bit overboard. So, then you kind of, if you're fasting for a caloric deficit and then you kind of go overboard when it's your window to eat, you probably find you're eating a little bit too much and not losing weight. Yeah, but it's important. I think fasting, people mustn't just think, well, I'm doing it for to lose weight. You can fast and reap the benefits and still have your 3 meals a day or whatever it is, or your same caloric goals or targets. So yeah, fasting isn't necessarily a weight loss tool. It's just frequently used that way.
Well, can you explain that a bit more, mate, about not using it for other than weight loss?
Yeah, sure. So I mean, obviously the main thing I think that kind of that people talk about, and I'm dreadful at pronouncing this word, but I'm going to call it autophagy or autophagy, let's say. But it's this idea of, your kind of bad cells being replenished. So the body's constantly doing this, making new cells from old cells. And this kind of, I read an article a while ago where someone's like, think of it as a kind of garbage truck going through your body and picking all these things up, or rather recycling unit, picking them up and getting rid of those or recycling that. And it's just a chance for it's doing like a really nice, good cellular regeneration in your body. So that's a big thing that people do it, and it's been linked to reduced risks of diseases. And just longevity is a big thing that it's been linked to. So yeah, there's that is a major thing that's not really tied to weight loss, although people do use it for weight loss. And another thing is, I know we've spoken about it before, is just giving you an opportunity just to explore a physiological and psychological relationship with food. You can fast just to see, well, what is it like to not give in to these sensations of hunger instantly, or to constantly be fixating about, oh, what next am I going to eat? Makes me think of my uncle. That's who said that once my grandparents, once his parents got to a certain age and visited, the only thing that they could think about was food. As breakfast was finished, they go, oh, what are we going to have for lunch? And he said it used to drive him insane. But so if you like that, maybe fasting could be an interesting experiment for you.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. I think it's just good to understand like emotional hunger and physical hunger. So exploring like a 24-hour fast or something like that is a good thing. Or if you can do that, even a 36-hour fast. Because once you do a 24-hour fast, let's just say you fast from 8 p.m. to 8 p.m., then really if you just have some water at 8 p.m. and then you go to bed, like that's 36 hours then almost, so it's pretty easy to get to 36 hours. And that's just, I think that's a good experiment just to kind of feel what hunger feels like. With the autophagy stuff, like I was actually listening to Alan Aragon recently, and like for people who don't know Alan Aragon, he's probably the most respected person in the nutritional field, and he's been doing research and coaching people, I think, for about 25 years. I think he's 50 now. But he made a really good point. He was like, autophagy, the research doesn't actually show autophagy as having any difference between fasting or just creating a calorie deficit, which I thought was really interesting. So I think a lot of the health benefits might be just from the calorie deficit component, not necessarily from fasting. And then a lot of the 16-8 time block that generally intermittent fasting is around, the reason it was, did you hear the story? Like the reason they met it a 16-8 fast?
No.
So it's because at the study clinic, it was an 8-hour shift. So like they wanted to get home, so sometimes we can think, oh, it has to be an 8-hour window because that's how the cells and everything magically change. But a lot of the times it's just the study design, which might be just because the work day. So again, it just brings it back to the three levers, and what they're really doing is creating a calorie deficit for you to suit your personality. Like that's the biggest thing. But I think what Brad said about like exploring it just to feel, okay, this is me, I'm bored and I'm not actually hungry. I just feel a bit bored or stressed or tired, or, that HALT acronym, like hungry, angry, lonely, tired, HALT. A lot of times it's just that you're not actually really hungry. You're just feeling emotions and you're using food to pacify yourself with that. So yeah, I thought that was really interesting. Just that we can kind of think that things are maybe magical or whatever reason, but he was like, yeah, there's no real, it just looks like there's nothing magical about it. If the person's in a deficit, they're going to get the same health and longevity benefits, which I thought was very interesting to be aware of.
Can I
Yeah.
ask about that? Did he
Yeah.
specify kind of what deficit range is healthy? Like and is it kind of caloric deficit in sort of perpetuity until death, or is it is it an exploratory period? What kind of range should we be reducing by?
I don't think it matters about being in a deficit. I think what matters is being at a healthy body composition. So, like, if you're at a healthy body composition, like for a guy, you're probably sub 25% body fat, but probably sub 20% body fat, 15 to 20% body fat. Like, you're probably going to be in good physical health, and you don't need to be worrying about being a deficit unless you're like, oh, I want to get leaner because aesthetically I want to look better from your perception. So, but if you're in over 30% body fat as a guy, then yeah, you should be trying to lose body fat, getting into a calorie deficit and getting your body fat levels down to a healthy position, because your disease risk and everything is just going to go up the higher your body fat levels are. It's as simple as that. Actually, something we can talk about as well as the BMI. I think that's an interesting thing to touch on as well. So, or not the BMI, sorry, the like RDA recommendations as well with regards to vitamins and minerals and protein levels. Just to be clear, like the RDA is the recommended daily amount to stay out of a diseased state. Okay, so your RDA is not from an optimal health standpoint, it's the recommended amount. So if you stay above this amount, you're not going to be in a sick state. Okay, so that's a really important thing as well, because sometimes when we have clients and we're like, oh, we're trying to get you to have considerably more protein, a lot of the times it's maybe twice the recommended daily amount that they've seen. It's quite shocking how much protein you're expected to eat or work up to. But that's the kind of, from the research, kind of getting to about 1.5 grams per kilo of body weight. So if you're an 80 kilo guy, you're trying to get in about 120 grams of protein a day. And that's when, again, from Alan Aragon, he says, like, once you get to 1.5, 1.6 grams, like, good things tend to happen from a health perspective with people. They build muscle, they recover better, they sleep better, they're not as hungry. All of these things start improving. Because you're getting up to at that optimal level. And it's the same with like your vitamins and minerals. So a lot of the times you might go to a general practitioner and he'll say, oh, you're fine. You feel like crap. You're like, there's something wrong with me. I'm going to get my blood checked. You go to your GP. He's like, oh, you're fine. Everything's in range. But really everything is above the RDA levels. But you might be way out of range from like an optimal point. So when I was in Melbourne, I interned at Fifth Element Wellness in Melbourne in Fitzroy. So I think they were ranked best gym in Australia 3 years in a row. And they did functional blood work. They had a doctor on site and just some really, really very, very like high level coaches there. So they had the optimal ranges for your blood work results, and they were very, very different to what your GP would say, because they might say you're at this level, but you might be way below the optimal ranges if you went to like a functional medicine clinic or something like that. So that's just something to be aware of as well. In particular, it can be very frustrating if you feel like there's something wrong with your health. You go to the doctor says everything checks out well. But then if you went to a functional medicine doctor, they'd be like, oh no, you're low on this, this, and this. Like you're really deficient in this. So that's just something to be aware of. We talked about that last week or the week before with clients, and they were all like, oh wow, like I didn't realize that. That's actually really, really good to understand that.
What kind of blood work would you recommend people get? And how important is it, if or when might be a good time to do that?
Like I got it in when I was working there. Like back then, it was expensive. I think it was about $400 Australian then. I think it depends where you are. I think in the US, because everything is more like the US has been there. All of this stuff has started in the US, so it's generally there's more clinics doing it, there's more competition. So I think now, I mean, this is back in 2016, so I think you can get it done a lot cheaper now. There are places as well where you can, like, you could just go to a clinic to get your blood taken, and then you send your sample, and then they'll read your sample for you. So that would be cheaper than going into like a fancy, functional medical clinic. So I don't really know, but like I guess it's like everything. You don't need to get your blood work done and getting your functional blood levels. It's probably for someone who maybe they don't feel very good. They think there's something wrong. They're not feeling great. And they've gone to their doctor. The doctor said everything's fine. Like there's nothing wrong. But then also I would be saying, first of all, before you start spending lots of money on this type of stuff, like, let's look at the fundamentals. Like, are you sleeping? Are you, giving yourself a bit of time, like an hour before bed, to make sure you're not on TikTok, for like 2 hours before bed in bed. Make sure your phone's out of the room, and just managing stress and exercising. Like, I think that the longer I'm coaching and looking at the research that's coming out, like exercise seems to be the biggest net positive you can add into your life. Like it's such an incredible thing that I think it fixes a lot of issues. So like exercise, sleep, and nutrition it'll sort out a lot of this stuff. And also, if you go and get your blood work done and you go to a doctor and they're like, yeah, you're deficient in X, Y, and Z, guess what they're going to tell you to do?
Exercise, sleep, eat right foods. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I know sometimes it's good to know, like, oh, okay, you're actually really low in magnesium, like supplement with that. You're super low in protein, supplement with that. Like that stuff can help. But like it's really funny because you can have like 10 different people coming to you, all different ages, different goals. One person wants to be like, cognitively like a high performer. He's in the business world. He's an entrepreneur. It's like, what do I need to do to optimize my cognitive performance? Like, well, let's just address your sleep first of all. Then let's get your diet checked in, and let's just make sure you're getting plenty of movement in throughout the week. And he's like, okay, awesome. Then the next person is like a 45-year-old woman, and she's like, I'm struggling to lose body fat. And I want to feel stronger in my body. Like, what should I do? Well, let's address your sleep first of all. Let's look at your nutrition, and then let's also get you moving and doing some sort of strength and movement throughout the week. And there's a guy in his 20s, and he's like, I want to get jacked out of my mind because I'm 25. It's like, okay, well, let's look at your sleep. Let's look at your nutrition. Let's look at your exercise. So like there's a bit of a theme coming up along there, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, that's also, I've got a friend who is a trainer, and he says, when clients come to him, basically his answer is always get stronger. I've got these aches and pains. Well, we get stronger. I want to lose weight. Well, I get stronger. It's the kind of thing. It's the movement part of that equation where you just I guess it's like a reminder. There's obviously so much nuance to all of these components, and there's so much data available. But fundamentally, for most of us who aren't competitive athletes or trying to defy death entirely, we could just pretty much dial in on almost all of the same things, like you said. It's not complicated. It's difficult, but it's not complicated.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's really simple, but it's not easy. Like getting to bed on time, that's really hard because you have like the most awesome stuff in the world on your phone that you can
TikTok.
just look at for hours, you know?
Now I
And
know
then you,
what you're up to, Connor, when you're not responding to my messages. You're on TikTok.
I know. Yeah, like responding to your messages at like 11:30 at night. Get this work done, Connor. This needs to be done. No, me and Brad have good work boundaries. So uh but yeah, it's really simple stuff. But yeah, that's where having accountability, having coaching, and then also it's like I had Jarlo from GMB Fitness. He's one of the three founders of GMB Fitness. Like, him, Ryan, and Andy, just super smart guys, really, really cool guys as well. Me and Brad are both GMB coaches. And it was really funny because we were talking about like the information, too much information in the fitness industry, and we were talking about like Andrew Huberman, and like Andrew Huberman is awesome. His podcast is amazing. His information is amazing, but it's so specific sometimes it can be very almost disabling for people, not enabling for people, in that he'll say something like, you need to do 48 minutes of zone 2 exercise. That's what the research says. So then if you do 20 minutes of cardiovascular exercise, you're like, oh, I didn't get to 48 minutes or 42 minutes, so I haven't gotten any of the benefits. So I'll either skip it next time, or I'll just wait until I have 42 minutes, because the research says that's when you get the benefits, right? So you just want to be thinking like, that information it's information, but really it's not very helpful a lot of the time for people. You want to just learn how can you turn this into part of your week and part of your life. And generally that comes back around by just focusing on, okay, what's the big elephant in the room here that's really derailing my results? Personally, for me, and I think for a lot of people, the big thing that's going to completely, I'm not going to say ruin my week, but make my week, like I'm going to stress eat, I'm going to be making worse decisions, I'm going to have a higher injury risk, I'm going to be more irritable, it's sleep, 100%. So like if my sleep is bad, I'm craving crap food, I'm going to overconsume caffeine just to push through the day. So like that's the massive elephant. If I can dial in my sleep, everything else, no cravings, performance in the gym, cognitively, work is just super productive. Everything's awesome. So like, I think sometimes we can listen to podcasts like that, which are really informative, but they can also not be very helpful from an actual implementation of things that are important to you for your specific goals, to get you the results that you're looking for.
Yeah, I think it comes down to this idea of the average person trying to self-optimize, and obviously striving to improve yourself, improving your health and your relationships with people. Fantastic points of focus, but reality is, for most of us, life is incredibly difficult, and there's many contrasting and competing responsibilities and demands, and just staying consistent with a resistance training program with a little bit of cardio, eating well, sleeping well. That's what you should be aiming for, not timing your meals perfectly, or taking this enhancing supplement at the right moment, or it's just doing the basics, doing them repeatedly over the long term. Nothing exciting about that.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about your morning routine, your optimized morning routine?
Yeah, I mean, that didn't last long, did it? But it was fun while it lasted, but it was just too much. Particularly now I'm in South Africa, and I get up quite early, but now it's starting to get darker, obviously, in the mornings, and it's very difficult to try and do some cold water immersion first thing in the morning when it's dark outside. Plus, I want to at least see the top of the fin before the shark gets me.
Yeah. Yeah. So you were doing like light, light
Yeah, I was
exposure, seeing the
getting out of
sun.
bed, going straight outside, walking for 20 minutes, and then cold water exposure, and then coming back home, and then doing my training session, and then eating after a
And then
16-hour fast.
it was like 2 p.m. and you're like, oh my God,
But
I've
to start
so
work.
much I have so much work to do. I've missed 2 client appointments. Oh my God, I'm so stressed. Yeah.
Yeah, I think optimization is actually when you finally hit retirement age, then you've got the time to explore. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's like the biggest thing with all this stuff is what are you going to do in the morning to make yourself feel good, but also what's realistic. I think that's a big thing. Like, oh, I want to meditate, I want to do breathing, I want to do like a swim, I want to go for a run, I want to listen or read a book, all this stuff. It's all really good stuff, but really it's like you don't like, I think for a lot of people it needs to be very quick, and it needs to be something that is you can sustain. And then the big thing is when you don't do it, it doesn't mean your day is a write-off. So that's a big
Absolutely.
thing that I struggled with before. Was I would get up when I was in Western Australia, actually. The climate's amazing there, and it'd be bright. In summer it'd be bright at like 5 a.m. and it'd be 20 degrees by 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning. And I would have this like 2-hour morning routine, and it was lovely. Like, it was such a beautiful way to start the day, and I was very blessed to be able to do it. But that's not probably something to sustain long term. And then on the mornings where I didn't have that like routine, I would feel like, oh yeah, today is not going to be a good day, that's it's kind of
Self-sabotage.
crazy. Yeah, like
Yeah.
Alex Hermosi, who's just an awesome content creator. He's really funny because he kind of goes against a lot of the personal development stuff, and he's a fitness industry guy, but now he's just an influencer. And he just says, like, your morning routine is actually stopping you from getting the stuff done that you need to get done. Like, just get up and get into the tasks that you need to get done, which I thought was pretty funny, because everyone else is like, you need to do X, Y, and Z, and then you need to be able to set your mind in the right place. And he's just like, I just get up and I just work like for 4 hours, and then I get my work done, and then I've got all my deep work done, which I think is a cool, like, it's a good way of looking at it. So I think somewhere in the middle, I think that get up, do something to just give yourself a bit of time, fill up your own tank a little bit. That might be just 5 or 10 minutes of breathing, reading a book, whatever. Staying off social media, I think, is a big thing as well, and email. And then, having a nice cup of coffee, maybe, writing down a few lines of gratitude in a journal or something like that, or planning your day, and then just getting into it, like whatever you need to get into, whether that is training or whether that is actually getting into your work day, and going from there. So that's kind of everything, mate. I know we need to wrap up now, but anything else you want to share?
I was
On
just
today?
thinking as you were saying that, with the AM routine, it's the same way if you think about skills training or any kind of training. You go through blocks. For 3 months you're working on this, for 6 months you're working on this, or whatever it may be. You could apply that same kind of thinking to your morning routine. So for the next month, I'm going to wake up and I'm going to read a book that I'm trying to get through or want to get through, and I'll do like 5-minute journaling afterwards. And then, when the weather's good, you could say, okay, well, now the first thing I'm doing is a 15-minute leisure and walk. It doesn't mean you have to put all of these things in the same morning. You could be cycling through them as blocks, or you could be alternating your morning, like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you journal, Tuesday, Thursday, you walk or whatever it may be. So another way of just thinking about it to kind of take off the pressure, but still allow you to explore multiple options.
Yeah, I love that, man. That's actually a really good thing. And one of the clients in the program, two of the clients actually, we talk about pick what gives you buy-in in the morning. So you mightn't be feeling very motivated. So you mightn't be our program, but it might be just some YouTube workout or yoga routine, and that makes you a bit more excited. So you do that, or kind of like what you were saying, like, oh yeah, okay, well, I'm just going to journal today, or I'm going to go for a walk today, or I'm just going to get started today. Like whatever gives you buy-in on that day, I think is a good thing as well. But I like your idea of saying like, okay, I'm actually, I'm going to, if I've never meditated before, maybe for the next month or 6 weeks or 2 months, I'm actually going to, that's the focus. So then, and then once you have that, then you can just leave. Then it's not going to be as hard to maintain because it becomes just habitual and you kind of understand the process a bit more. So yeah, I think that's a really, really good idea. And I think that's a good way to end today's podcast.
Cool.
All right, brother.
Thanks, Connor.
I will chat to you on Monday, mate. Okay. Take care.
Right.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.